Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Leadership and Retention Lab. I am really excited to have Lyda Bannock with Eckberg and Lammers with me today. Welcome, Lyda. Great to have you.
Thank you.
Our topic, we really talked about what would be most helpful to small business owners right now. And where we landed is the topic that we're going to land on today, which is the leave law puzzle. Why it's so easy to do it wrong. So, because it is, and that's a
It
lot of the
is.
conversations we've had. So Lyda, do you want to just share with everyone a little bit about your background and the practice you have?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. Hello, everyone. Lyda Bannock, I am a labor and employment attorney. I practice in Minnesota and Wisconsin, and my work focuses on helping employers prevent and resolve workplace issues from day-to-day compliance, investigations, discipline, discharge, accommodations, leave management, and everything in between.
Wonderful. So you've got it all covered. You've got it all covered.
Not
Yes.
at all.
And day to day, as we talked even before we got started here today, this issue of time off, you'd think it would be simple, but
Yeah.
it's really a pain for a lot of employers. And as this title came up, even with good intentions, it is really easy to get it wrong. So
Yeah.
what I wanted to start off with is a little bit just getting into why this topic and why now. What are you seeing right now
Yeah.
coming across your desk regarding leaves, time off, all of those topics?
Yeah, I would say I'm seeing it on a daily basis. On a daily basis, I'm working through this, and I think it's kind of multifaceted for why. I think number one, there's a complicated scheme of laws that are applying to employers from federal, state, and local laws, some of them overlapping. So leave laws are getting more tricky. Whether you're in Minnesota or you're not in Minnesota, leave laws are getting more tricky. Minnesota's far trickier.
Yes, yes.
We're talking,
I'm
regionally.
gonna try to
Um,
keep it broad, but yeah, Minnesota, like, kind of brought
yes,
this to a head for me.
yes,
Absolutely.
absolutely. But I think there are other more reasons. There are a couple other items too, like um, I think a younger generation prioritizes more time off
Mhm.
and more activities with their kids, and the other is a huge number of the leaves that we're seeing surround mental health and
Sure,
needs
sure,
with mental health and the complexities of um it's not a physical need but a mental and
sure.
just individuals struggling through that on their own. So I'm seeing a lot of requests relating to leave along all of those topics.
Sure, sure. Now, what and again, what parts of all of those pieces, all the regulation, and
Yeah,
like you said, I mean, thank goodness the topic of mental health is more commonly talked about and is,
absolutely.
kind of risen to kind of more public discourse. I think it's really important, but it does create complexities. So I'm
Yeah.
curious, kind of what pieces do you see kind of accelerate complexity around these types of issues for businesses?
Yeah. Um I I think, and I'm going to get the statistic wrong, but I there was a statistic I heard earlier that said that an individual who's pregnant in the city of St. Paul, there was something like 20 or 30 laws that applied to them.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
So,
Okay.
I mean, that just gives an example of that's at federal, state, and
Sure.
local legislation. So one leave or the need for one leave, I mean, go in Minnesota, one leave request when I have an employer calling in. And I will also say a lot of times leave requests are accompanied by a performance component.
Sure,
So,
sure. Okay,
which
okay.
really heightens up the game of, and that's most often when I get into leave requests.
Mhm.
Well, it can kind of be both. There is the performance component where we have an employee, we're looking at a potential discipline, and I'm like, well, let's evaluate this. Were they on FMLA? Were they on earned sick and safe time? Sort of all of the things. Um, but others I'm often seeing are, um, Minnesota just implemented Minnesota paid family and medical leave at the beginning of the
Sure,
year,
sure.
which overlaps with earned sick and safe time. earn sick and safe time, you're not supposed to ask a large number of questions. It's
Sure,
the
sure.
point of the leave is to just an employee to say, I need to take leave for a earn sick and safe time reason. The employer really can't question it.
Mhm.
So we're looking at, okay, have you or have you, went through all of your ESST leave?
Mhm.
Okay, check, that leave's out of place. Are they eligible for FMLA? Are they eligible for paid family medical
Okay.
leave? Because both of those are job protected. So the leave situations I'm seeing are,
Mhm.
checklist component. Are we complying with this? Are we complying with this? As we go down the list, and the number of leaves is just as cited in that pregnancy example, there's a lot of them.
Absolutely. And if someone's not super familiar with some of the federal laws, because again, our audience can be coming from anywhere in the
Yep.
US. Could you talk a little bit about, not everybody knows the initials FMLA or ADA.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
can break down a few of what those laws are and that apply
Yes.
universally, no matter where you are, to give a little bit of that understanding and education
Yeah.
around things that apply to everybody, despite, again, states have their own
Yep.
complexity and even cities and jurisdictions do as well. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say the three heavy hitters from leave law
mhm,
on the federal perspective are the Family and Medical Leave Act, which is FMLA, and the Americans with Disabilities Act,
okay.
which is the ADA, and Pregnant Workers Fairness Act,
Okay.
PWFA. So
Interesting.
there are so
Okay.
many acronyms in employment law.
Sure.
But FMLA applies to employers 50 or
Okay.
greater employees within a
Mhm.
certain radius, but provides up to 12 weeks of leave for medical circumstances, care
Sure.
for yourself, care for a family member, or birth of or adoption of a child.
Which I think is what most people are
Most
familiar
people are
with,
familiar with that. That
that
was
side.
back
Yeah.
in the I can't. It was under Bill Clinton's administration, so
Sure, sure.
that's been around for a long time.
Yeah,
We've Employers over 50 have that one pretty well figured out.
sure.
Um, The next one, the Americans with Disabilities
Mhm.
Act, a lot of people historically, when it was just these two laws at play, employers would believe, all right, I've complied with FMLA. Say
Mhm.
somebody had a stroke. I've
Sure,
complied with FMLA. I've given the 12 weeks of leave. Now I can't hold your leave anymore. I can't hold this
sure,
position. This was the only employee in the position. We need to separate and get somebody to fill this position.
sure,
And that's where employers often make mistakes
sure.
because the Americans with Disabilities Act says that you have to make reasonable accommodations to a
Okay,
disability.
okay,
If that stroke could be considered a disability, then we need to be asking, is there
mhm,
additional leave that we can provide under the ADA
okay.
as a reasonable accommodation?
Sure. Okay. So layers, they kind of layer
Layers,
and
layers, layers.
stack.
And then the other one to think about, the newest one, the Pregnancy Workers Fairness Act, takes the ADA but is even more generous towards employees in
Okay.
providing leave in pregnancy related conditions.
Okay.
So those are the three heavy hitters on a federal
Yes.
level and often employers, I have so many employers that are like, I want to be generous. Of course, take your time
Sure.
off.
Sure.
But there's a point where you just can't accommodate it from a business need. So
That's
employers,
right. Yes.
they're in the hard circumstance of wanting to provide leave, but also needing to run a business, and
Mhm.
that's where it really gets tricky.
Exactly, because again, you care about that employee. I mean, again, the smaller businesses, it is, you do know everyone pretty deeply personally. And so if someone does have a medical circumstance, there's a lot of wanting to be there for the person, to provide the time off. At the same time, there's work that has to get done, and smaller businesses just don't have the same flexibility in a lot of cases to have an extra person on staff to help
Yeah.
cover while
Yep.
someone's gone. So it's really an interesting tension for business leaders as they walk through it. And I'm sure quite emotional, I guess, as people are walking through these realities of medical issues that are conflicting with the work getting done. So, I
Absolutely.
mean, do you find yourself having a lot of almost emotional coaching sessions, I imagine, as you help leaders through this, trying to work through these deeply challenging issues?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The number of times where I've had clients say, thanks for helping be my therapist.
I
That
bet.
that's a large part because being able to understand the dynamics and the pulls between
Mhm.
being a good human and running a good business is a struggle.
Sure, sure, and, and there are, as in my HR career, I've been witness to tragic
Yeah.
circumstances, like a young man in his 30s that had a some type of terminal stomach cancer, and, he maxed out every every program we had and had not signed up for long-term disability because that was an option at our company. It wasn't
Yeah.
provided by the company. And, I just ever since then, I have always been like, sign up for long-term disability, or in companies I've worked with, made that automatic because it does, if those are supportive programs that make those transitions either easier or harder for the individual as we go. So you're even probably helping navigate the benefits and insurance
Mhm.
side as well, I imagine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm. Um, so, like, where do well-intentioned leaders most often run into issues? So, what's most common that you run into?
From I mean, most often it looks like um, leaders who have exhausted FMLA and they're like, we really need this employee back.
Mhm.
Or, exhausted one of the leaves, but not understanding there's a number of leaves that could still
Okay.
apply.
Sure,
So
sure.
it's really that dynamic between wanting to support the employee compliance with the
Mhm.
laws, but running a business.
Sure.
Um, Another piece is understanding that a lot of these laws have, like FMLA is really document
Mhm.
heavy.
Yes,
Within
yes.
5 numbers of days, you need to do X, and X number of days, you need to do Y.
Mhm.
So, I see a lot of documentation issues.
Mhm.
Now, the legal liability, no employer's perfect. There's not a whole lot of likely liability. It requires
Sure,
these deadlines, but,
sure,
there's not technical flexibility. But,
sure.
um, more often it happens and I'm so glad these employers reach out when they're like, we can't do this anymore. We need to
Sure,
terminate. And
sure.
I'm like, no, 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 no. Think about X, Y, and Z. There's a lot of risk involved. I wouldn't recommend
Yes.
that.
Yes, okay, so that's often where and then are you often recommending as a next step? So, if termination doesn't make sense and they haven't exhausted leave or there's risk associated with that, are there alternatives that you will recommend or suggest for
Yeah.
employers that are in that situation?
Yeah. So I'll give an example from Minnesota recently, because when we're
Mhm.
talking about Minnesota paid family and medical leave,
Yes,
which
yes,
is similar to FMLA, but just provides pay through an insurance program,
sure.
or earn sick and safe time, the ESST, which is again leave where the employer
Mhm,
can't really question it. A lot of times, what the advice that I'm giving is, or with FMLA, the federal one,
mhm,
I'm like, if you're an employer and you want to get somebody in this position, whether it's this employee
mhm.
or another, what you need to do is make sure that you're exhausting the leave they have.
Sure,
So
sure.
if it's FMLA, get it designated right away
Yes,
so
like
that we can
begin it
start
so
that
that
clock.
it runs, right? So,
Yeah.
okay.
Yep.
Mhm,
So that's my most common advice, is get them running so or get them started so that clock is running.
mhm,
Designate as ESST or paid
mhm,
family medical leave if you can. And paid family medical leave in Minnesota, or Minnesota's not the first state to have that. Across the nation, there are
sure,
these kind of laws. Tracking is really important.
okay.
Um, Tracking how much leave they've used, because you can't force an implied employee to apply for this leave,
Sure,
but it's your job as an employer to make sure if they took any leave that would have qualified but they didn't apply. So
okay.
tracking is really important, having systems in place.
Sure, sure, which is again, as I've worked with smaller businesses, they have a payroll system typically, or they're using, let's say, QuickBooks for their payroll. Very common, but those systems don't include naturally a way of tracking time off. And
Yeah.
so tracking and having a system to do that has become more important. And I don't think you can really, I don't know, I haven't really checked with QuickBooks, but there's really sometimes really complex to set up a system And then it's, you can always do Excel, but that's a pain.
Right.
That is a pain as
Manual.
well. So it's not
Yeah.
easy, no matter how you decide to do it.
And we were also talking a little bit ahead of time where I've had a number of clients and talk with benefits providers that have looked at totally outsourcing leave
Yes,
management.
yes, that's
And
certainly an option for a lot of employers.
but what my clients are finding is that often they need to still be involved to such
Yeah,
extent
yeah.
that they're not enjoying the experience, so to say.
Exactly. So yes, and when it's outsourced, oftentimes you still need to provide the
Yep,
information on the time
yep,
off. You're still the one having the conversation. So it's kind of like I see that with PEOs as well. PEO people
yes,
think when they put a PEO in that that's going to get HR off their plate, but they still need to call the PEO to
yep,
answer questions. So it's one of those where there are parts of it that are certainly a benefit, but
yep,
it often is perhaps a little oversold on how it's
yeah,
really going to help you for sure. Well,
absolutely.
I also work with a lot of employers that are working virtually, a lot of professional services firms that have people. The beauty of that is you can hire people anywhere to answer your help desk calls or to do the technical work. And it's wonderful from a talent standpoint that you can hire people everywhere and put a virtual team together. The downside though is that the way that the world is changing, every state and potentially every city or even county has specific time off rules. So what I keep
Mhm.
finding is, again, well-meaning, there'll be a core, let's say a PTO policy that's supposed to be for everyone. But when you look at the states that employees are living in and working in, it doesn't quite work. So it creates a lot of complexity. So if you could walk a little bit about what people need to think about if they're actually a multi-state employer.
Absolutely, and I've got a a long presentation coming up on this
Oh,
actually next month.
nice,
Um, yeah,
nice.
I mean, exactly as you say, you need to there's a compliance level, you have to comply the place where the employee is located,
Yeah.
um, and which is incredibly difficult. I will be honest, in COVID, when there were so many employers that were having remote employees
Mhm.
sort of all over the country,
Yeah.
most have scaled that back significantly.
Yes.
Very significantly scaled
Mhm.
that back because having one employee in California and dealing with all of California's
Sure,
compliance rules,
sure.
or Colorado's another,
Colorado. Yeah.
they're finding, many employers are like that. We can't do that again. We can't have an
Sure,
employee,
sure.
and they're sort of scaling back the number of states that they operate in.
Mhm.
So then so that's for kind of remote employees.
Yeah,
There's been a
yeah.
definite scale back. The
Mhm.
other side is multi-state employers where you've got sort of a hub in Minnesota or Wisconsin and a
Sure.
hub in Colorado,
Mhm.
which is a little bit easier because then you only need to find the resources in those two states.
Sure,
But
sure.
when I'm advising employers, it's that you need to look at it. It's beyond it's leave management, but it's
Mhm.
separation agreements. It's
Yes.
at hiring, it's, confidentiality, non-solicitation, all of those states will
Yes.
have their own employment laws applicable. So, I often have conversations with,
Mhm.
employers that are looking to expand to multi-state, and
Sure.
that's the nature. I'm just making sure that they understand how that will work with their employees, and is that something they wanna get into? And
Yes.
many do, which is great, but go into it with your eyes wide open.
Absolutely. And from a practical standpoint, it ends up being that you have like a core set of policies and then your Colorado handbook
Yes,
supplement. As you may
exactly.
have a Colorado time off policy and a
Mhm.
Minnesota time off policy. And
Yep,
it's getting so you may have an individual time off accrual policy for every state. And
yeah.
so it's one of those that just think is so different from how if you've been in business for a couple decades,
Yes.
those old rules don't apply anymore. It really has significantly changed,
Yes.
and that means you have to have maybe 5 different onboarding processes for your 5
Yep.
different states. I mean, you try to not have it be that complex, but that is the reality of
Yeah.
how that works now today.
Yeah.
So
That is 100% the reality. And there are a lot of things that I'm finding myself more and more talk to your legislature.
yes, it's kind of a write your congressman
It is
issue
what
more
it
than
is.
anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean,
Yeah.
I get a lot of people being like, "It shouldn't be that way," and it's like, yes, and
Talk to your
and for
legislators.
now
Yeah.
for now we have to do it this way.
Yeah.
So, no, that's I think it's just an important frame, and it shouldn't prevent a company from taking moving into a new market or hiring a top talent. But you just have to be ready for the administration or like the back office side of supporting
Yeah.
that employee in that state. That's all. That's
Yeah.
all. Um, so, as you think about for people going forward, are there practical advice that you would give a leader that is listening to this and perhaps saying, "Uh-oh, I might not be doing what I need to do with time off." What can they be doing?
I mean, I would in I know, and my firm is, and my employment team and Julie and your team, we're able to
Sure,
keep up on these because this is what we do on a
sure.
daily basis.
Mhm.
Use
Yeah,
your resources.
yes,
There are so many that have free or low cost resources, Julie, like you
yes.
talk about
Yeah,
here
I
today.
do. Mhm,
And you bring on these leaders within the industry to help small businesses stay afloat, because I
mhm.
work with a lot of small businesses and compliance is hard.
Yeah,
Employment is but one small component of
mhm.
all of the laws, regulations, contracts with a business. But making the connections with a great CPA, a great HR
Sure,
consultant,
sure.
attorney, employment attorney, really that's and almost all almost all of the great individuals that I know within those
Mhm.
spaces have educational resources that are at no cost to people.
That's right. That's right. Yes.
So
Yeah.
really, that's where you start. You start with the connections and the relationships
Mhm.
to the people that are doing this on a daily basis.
And when I talk to businesses that have gotten to that point where they're like, okay, we're big enough, we probably need some advice. There's usually someone in the business that is either administrator or oftentimes it's the spouse or mom of the business
Yeah.
owner that is
Yeah.
kind of taken over HR many cases. So it's someone that everybody trusts. And
Yep.
that person oftentimes has spent hours researching and really trying to get into these topics and understand. And again, I just always go back to, I mean, that's wonderful to seek
Yeah.
education on your own and to try to look at it independently. But at this point, you can't yet trust Google or AI to
No
give
way.
the right answer on how to navigate something that's got so many layers and so much complexity. So I
Mhm.
think you can get good general information from doing your own research, but at the end of the day, if you really want to make sure you're being compliant and avoid headaches up front, you really do need to get advice. You really
Yeah.
need to engage, HR leadership, attorneys to help you. I mean, whatever whoever you're comfortable with in order to really go down that path of
Yeah.
having the right system processes and policies in place. So,
And while you mentioned that one, let me give you two kind of freebies that are sort of
okay,
related.
please, yes.
Um,
Uh-huh.
Number one being AI. Watch out for using AI in your for any employment situation, because right
Uh-huh.
now employment litigators, if there's an allegation of discrimination or harassment or whatever it
Sure.
might be, employment litigators are requesting access or subpoenaing your
Oh my
chat
goodness.
gpt records. So if you've
Wow.
typed
Okay.
into chat gpt, help me with a pregnant employee that we don't really want to provide leave because we can't accommodate, whatever it might be,
Whatever it is.
it's going to show your intent, and
Okay.
it's going to
Okay.
it could sink that claim, but they're requesting those records.
Oh,
Never ever
wow.
put actual employee information in
Sure.
a AI function, and just be really careful of what you're entering.
Sure. That is
So,
great advice because right now I think people use AI as an advisor, which is not a terrible way to use it, but you have to be really conscious and
yes.
aware of the data you're
Yeah.
putting in. And to your point, the fact that that can become discoverable. It feels like a
Mhm.
private conversation, doesn't it?
It's
When
not.
you're working with AI, but it
Yeah.
is not. It's
No.
not. And that is a great reminder.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah. So that's
Yeah.
huge. That's
And
huge.
the second one is that I I do like a monthly roundtable with HR
Mhm.
professionals where I've just done a bunch of like sampling into Chat GPT, and I've got documents that come back like that aren't correct. They're
Okay.
legally not
Sure.
correct. So
Okay.
if you're using it to draft your documents, just be really
Mhm.
careful. So
Sure.
2
Sure.
quick
Yes.
pointers on AI.
Yes, exactly. There's still a place for expertise. And,
Absolutely.
again, like we're saying, it's just not reliable. It's just
Yeah.
not reliable.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
and it tends to agree with you, whatever you say. So that's the other side of it too. It will not push back like someone like you or I will do,
Yeah.
with honest feedback as well
Yeah.
on
Yep.
situations. So
Yep.
so talk a little bit then, how do you work with businesses? How do you help them stay compliant so that people know and can reach out for assistance?
Yeah, absolutely. So, a lot of people can be scared to contact an attorney or
Sure.
scared to contact a HR assistant, somebody who
Yeah,
assists in the
yeah.
HR
Mhm.
sphere. But I, it doesn't have to be scary. It can look like, just reach out. You have a
Mhm.
question, reach out, and
Yeah.
then we don't talk for months, or maybe we're in an ongoing matter, but it just reach out when the questions arise.
Yes.
We're here for you. We've got a team here for you. And then, like I said before, it's just so important to educate yourself. Talk with your vendors who have great
Mhm.
resources. We've got a free monthly roundtable that
See,
where
perfect.
HR come
Yes.
talk. We've got business and breakfast events. We've got one coming up this Thursday where we're talking about the basics for HR.
Great.
Um, but so it's connecting, it's educating, we're here for you, we're available for you. No question is too small because this space
Uh-huh.
isn't easy.
Yes, and Lida, if you could be sure to email me those links to those resources,
Yeah,
I can drop
absolutely.
those attached to this, so anyone that watches the replay can see and look
Perfect.
into how to contact you and maybe some of those forums that you're
Yeah,
offering, which would be a great resource for people. And in my
absolutely.
case, if it's one of those where you're ready to have your own HR advisor help guide you through these things and
Yeah,
the way our advisors work is we work directly within businesses. We work as your HR team, taking questions, helping navigate your compliance issues, general HR issues. And if we run into something that is complicated, we will call and bring Lida in to
yeah.
help with an issue. If it's something that is something that just a HR expert can't handle on their own, so we know when to escalate and bring in resources like Lida into the mix as well. So,
And the other aspect is that I know when to de-escalate. Like if you
sure,
don't need my
exactly.
level of services, I am absolutely going to recommend that you work with an HR advisor because
Sure.
in the end we're here for businesses and helping businesses grow, and if
Mhm.
it's me you need, if it's Julie you need, we'll get you to that place no matter where you
That's
start.
right. That's right. And even like a major HR conflict oftentimes is better initially investigated or to have collect information from an HR specialist that can then work with LIDA to figure out solutions if you've got something that's really challenging or complex. So there's a teamwork aspect here that's really important to know. And again, obviously, like I'm always trying to be approachable. Well, Lida, you're certainly approachable. We're not scary HR. we're, we're approachable HR intentionally because again, we sincerely just want you to be able to run your business in a way that works for your people and works for your clients. So absolutely. Well, any
Absolutely.
final words, any advice for our business owners before we close this out for today?
I would just say you're doing great. There are resources available. I know that these conversations or sitting in on presentations
Mhm.
can be a little bit scary because you don't know what you don't know, but you don't know what you don't know, and you
Sure.
need to go to places where you can learn those things you don't know. So make sure you're reaching out to resources, reaching out to Julie, reaching out to
Mhm.
us, and we're here for you. That's what we do all day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you so much, Lida, for joining us, provided so much great information, and we'll drop additional resources in this, in the chat associated with this recording so that people will be able to access those as well. So great. Thank you
Wonderful.
so much.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
me.